Hey everybody, and welcome back to I Just Want to Talk About the Bible. If this is your first time joining us, then let me just welcome you and say that I am so glad that you're here. My name is Christian Keeter, and I live in the southeast of the United States of America with my amazing, beautiful, godly wife Lacey and our two wonderful daughters Felicity and Serenity. Let's start today in the book of 1 Samuel. Now, we're working our way towards what is really a very simple concept that if we apply it, not only will it greatly reduce stress and anxiety in our lives, but it'll also introduce a really cool excitement and confidence in the Lord that will make each and every day an adventure. And I want to start in 1 Samuel, and we'll see what this simple concept is in a few minutes. But let's start in 1 Samuel chapter 10. Now, what's happening in 1 Samuel chapter 10? 1 Samuel is going to be a book where we see the transition from the time of the judges to the time of the monarchy. So let me just kind of frame this up in the history of Israel a little bit so that we understand what's going on a little bit better. Not going to get really in depth. That's not necessary for the sake of our discussion. But let's just go back to the time of the Exodus. So the people are led out of Egypt by the Lord through Moses. Of course, they're in the wilderness for 40 years, and then Moses dies, and Joshua takes up the mantle and begins, and leads the people into the promised land. Through Joshua, God plants the people in the promised land. After Joshua dies, there is going to be the period of the judges where there are these leaders that come up. The book of Judges is a very tumultuous time where there's a lot of oppression from enemies, a lot of people's turning their back on the Lord and then crying out to him and him raising up a deliverer or a judge. So then there's that time. And then we have someone who is a prophet and the final judge, and that is Samuel. Samuel then bridges the gap between the time of the judges and the time of the monarchy. So some Bible trivia. Who was the first king of Israel? The first monarch of the entire nation of Israel? It was Saul. So, Saul. And bonus points, what tribe was Saul from? He's from the tribe of Benjamin. And that is actually going to be a little relevant for the sake of our discussion today. And so we're going to be looking at Saul, and after Saul, of course, David is going to be king, and then David's son Solomon, and after Solomon, the kingdom is going to split into the northern and southern kingdom, and all of these events that I just said take place in 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, and that works its way towards the Assyrian and Babylonian invasions and the exile. But anyways, so let's back up to Samuel and Saul here. So in 1 Samuel chapter 10, here we are in 1 Samuel chapter 10, Saul is anointed the first king over Israel. And the story of Saul is pretty tragic. And I mean that almost like in a technical sense, in that it starts so well in many ways. You look at Saul, and in many respects he starts well, but as his story unfolds, you're like, well, that's not good. Well, that wasn't a good decision. Well, that's a big red flag. And then, by the end of it, of course, the kingdom is taken from Saul and his line and given to someone else, someone, who has a heart like God's. And that, of course, is going to be David. So Saul is, he is a wonderful lesson to us in this. Success is not just a function of starting well. Success is a function of ending well also. Many, many people start well in all sorts of different arenas. They start well in lots of different areas. But do they end well? Right? And so we see that Saul does not end well. He starts well, but then it goes downhill. And in fact, David's son Solomon is very much the same way. Solomon, you're like, oh yeah, he asks for wisdom. God commends him on what he says. He starts so well, but by the end of it, you're like, that was not good. Like, as you read through Solomon's story, there's just red flag after red flag after red flag. And by the end of it, you're like, that was the dumbest wise guy ever. Like, what was he thinking? So kind of parallels between Saul and the first king and Solomon, the third king. Maybe I'm getting a little bit too granular here. But anyways, so Saul Saul. Let's look at Saul here. So after he's been anointed, Samuel gives Saul these instructions in 1 Samuel chapter 10, verse 8. He says, "Then go down before me to Gilgal, and behold, I am coming down to you to offer burnt offerings and to sacrifice peace offerings. 7 days you shall wait until I come to you and show you what you shall do." So we have this really specific instruction from Samuel to Saul. He tells him to at Gilgal wait 7 days, and Samuel is going to come and he's going to offer, he's going to sacrifice peace offerings, right? So let's flip a few pages ahead here to 1 Samuel 13, and we're going to see this event happen that Samuel was pointing ahead to. I'm going to begin reading in verse 1 of 1 Samuel 13, and just for the sake of context, and I'll probably offer a little bit of commentary along the way. But let's get started. So verse 1, 1 Samuel 13. Saul lived for 1 year and then became king, and when he had reigned for 2 years over Israel, Saul chose 3,000 men of Israel. 2,000 were with Saul in Michmash, which that's a really fun place name to say, Michmash. 2,000 were with Saul in Michmash and the hill country of Bethel, and 1,000 were with Jonathan in Gibeah of Benjamin. The rest of the people he sent home, every man to his tent. Jonathan defeated the garrison of the Philistines that was at Geba, and the Philistines heard of it. And Saul blew the trumpet throughout all the land, saying, "Let the Hebrews hear." And all Israel heard it. Said that Saul had defeated the garrison of the Philistines, and also that Israel had become a stench to the Philistines. And the people were called out to join Saul at Gilgal. Okay, so let's pause there. That was your verse 4. Notice where the people are called out to join Saul. At Gilgal. Remember back where Samuel says, "Then go down before me to Gilgal." Okay, so we're at the same place here. Resuming in 1 Samuel 13, verse 5. And the Philistines mustered to fight with Israel 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen and troops like the sand of the seashore in multitude. So this is a huge army. That is so many people. They came up and encamped in Michmash to the east of Beth Aven. When the men of Israel saw that they were in trouble, for the people were hard pressed, the people hid themselves in caves and in holes and in rocks and in tombs and in cisterns. And some Hebrews crossed the fords of the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. Saul was still at Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. So there's this big Philistine army. People are terrified. They're hiding themselves in crazy places, like, caves and holes and in rocks and in tombs and in cisterns. Like, people are terrified of this army. Now, picking up in verse 8, and this is where it really begins to tie in with 1 Samuel 10, verse 8, and kind of focuses in on the topic for today. It says, "He waited 7 days, the time appointed by Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattering from him." So, again, just to keep it in front of us, back in 1 Samuel 10, what did Samuel say to him? 1 Samuel 10:8, I'll reread that. It says, "Then go down before me to Gilgal, and behold, I am coming down to you to offer burnt offerings and to sacrifice peace offerings. 7 days you shall wait until I come to you and show you what to do." And so, again, back in 1 Samuel 13:8, he waited 7 days, the time appointed by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattering from him. So what is Saul going to do now? What will his response to this be? Let us find out. Continuing in verse 9, it says, "So Saul said, 'Bring the burnt offering here to me, and the peace offerings.' And he offered the burnt offering. As soon as he had finished offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came." Notice that. As soon as he had finished offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came. And Saul went out to meet him and greet him. Samuel said, "What have you done?" And Saul said, "When I saw that the people were scattering from me, and that you did not come within the days appointed, and that the Philistines had mustered at Michmash, I said, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the favor of the Lord. So I forced myself and offered the burnt offering." And Samuel said to Saul, "You have done foolishly. You have not kept the command of the Lord your God, with which he commanded you. For then the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel. But now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be prince over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you." So we'll stop there. That was down through verse 14 of 1 Samuel 13. Now, if you look at Saul's life, this is not an isolated incident. We see that this is just kind of an illustration, a snapshot of the overall trajectory of his reign over Israel. It wasn't a singular, solitary mistake. This was an illustration of the direction of his leadership, of his heart, right? So if you look at 1 Samuel 15, for example, you can see that he does not obey the command of the Lord as to how to handle the battle when he's fighting Agag, king of the Amalekites. You can read about that in 1 Samuel 15. That's another illustration of just kind of what's actually in his heart and his disobedience to the Lord. But looking at the passage that we just read here in 1 Samuel 13, so what exactly is going on here? Well, what's going on is we see that Saul offers this unlawful sacrifice. He wasn't supposed to be the one who was to offer this. And there's a few reasons why that would be. One, he just had a direct command through the prophet, where back in chapter 10 of verse 8, it says, "Then go down before me to Gilgal, and behold, I am coming down to you to offer burnt offerings and to sacrifice peace offerings." Samuel was to do this. Furthermore, Saul was from the tribe of what again? Benjamin. Not Levi. He's the tribe of Benjamin. And the Levites were the ones that served in the tabernacle, the ones who served as priests, the ones who offered sacrifices. So we see that this is Saul is kind of taking the matter into his own hands. He's not waiting, but rather he's looking at his circumstances and he's taking matters into his own hands. And you look at this and you're like, dude, if you could have just waited 5 or 10 more minutes, it says right there in verse 10 of chapter 13, as soon as he had finished offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came. He was on the way. If only he had waited. And so this is an example of a larger topic that we see people throughout the Bible and all of us wrestle with, which is, will we wait on God's timing, or will we take matters into our own hands and do what's right in our own eyes? I mean, you could think of the example of Abraham and Sarah with Hagar and Ishmael. Of course, that's another one. And the Bible has examples of when people did wait for the Lord and he moved, they waited for his timing. And then we have examples like this one where they did not. And I think that if we look at our own lives, we could say, yeah, I can see times where I did wait for the Lord in a circumstance where I believed that he would move, and he did, and I didn't rush it. And I can think of other times when, I didn't. And, so I think that we, just like the people in the scriptures, the people in the scriptures were just normal people like you and me, by the way. Like they, felt the same things we would feel. They faced the same challenges we would. And they're just normal people, like you and me, who encountered the Lord, who knew the Lord, or at least some of them knew the Lord. So, waiting on the Lord. So this time in between here, this time where, Samuel's delayed, what would have been the right response? What would have been the right way to respond? Well, the obvious answer is he should have waited. He should have just obeyed the Lord regardless of what his circumstances were, right? Well, it's like, yeah, but what is this time in between? What is this time where we're faced with a situation and we're waiting for God to move? Well, that time is what we would call faith and trust. Right? That is the window of time in which we can operate in faith and trust. There is a need, there is something going on, there is a circumstance, and we can either choose to trust the Lord, walk by faith, and do things his way, or the alternative, which comes very, very naturally to us, which is to try to grab control, which is exactly what Saul does here. He says, I forced myself. He saw that the people were scattering, and so he's like, all right, I got to do this. I'm going to try to force God's hand, so to speak, because he said, I had not. It's tragic, because he said to Samuel in verse 12, I said, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the favor of the Lord. And so he's claiming to seek the favor of the Lord by offering the sacrifice, but is he seeking the favor of the Lord by going against the word through the prophet, the command of the prophet, and doing things contrary to God's way, being from the tribe of Benjamin and not the tribe of Levi? So you see, even that's just kind of backwards here. But what's the point here? The point is we need patience and endurance. We need to be able to sit and wait for the Lord and to be among those who, who sit still and see the salvation of God, who will wait for him and not try to force matters, not try to take things into our own hands, right? Now, this is, an important topic in and of itself that we could be discussing right now. This is, and I'm sure you could already see applications for this. But there's one specific application that I want to draw out today that has been super encouraging to me. And it has to do with God's timing, and it has to do with the way that the Lord works in our lives, right? So what is this specific area? Well, let me just share with you a story from my life recently that will lead us right into this. So a few weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago now, at the time of this recording, I we were going to church, and it was Sunday morning, and I opened up the notes on my phone. I have a document where I keep notes from the sermon, and I'd open it up just to get ready to take notes during the sermon and write down the things that the Lord showed me, of course. But something really interesting happened. I felt like all at once, the Lord very clearly spoke to me through the last week's sermon notes that I happened to notice just as I opened my notes to take notes that Sunday. So the notes from 7 days prior. And guys, it was like a lightning bolt. It was like so clear and really helpful for me personally, because it is kind of the way that I'm wired, the way that I think. But I think that you can probably relate to this too. So the sermon was on the book of Esther. And I just want to give you a little bit of context before I say what that specific application to my own life that I think you can probably relate to as well is. Just really, really quickly, I'm not going to get into detail at all because we're not doing an overview of the history of the Hebrew people today. And Esther was used by God to deliver the Jews who were in the provinces of Persia under King Ahasuerus from genocide. There had been a plot to annihilate the Jewish people, and through Esther, the Lord delivered the Jewish people, and the Jews were told to defend themselves on that day. So in Esther 9, verses 1 through 2, it says this: Now in the 12th month, Now in the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's command and edict were about to be carried out, on the very day when the enemies of the Jews had hoped to gain mastery over them, the reverse occurred. The Jews gained mastery over those who hated them. The Jews gathered in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who sought their harm, and no one could stand against them, for the fear of them had fallen on all peoples. Again, that was Esther 9, 1 through 2. Now notice that. Notice some of this verbiage here back in verse 1. On the very day, it says, when the king's command and edict were about to be carried out, on the very day when the enemies of the Jews hoped to gain mastery over them, the reverse occurred. And so one of the points that the pastor drew out was just how, look, that was last minute. That was the very day that they were supposed to be destroyed, that the opposite happened and that they were delivered. And just a couple of the points that I wrote down from that as I was taking notes were that God, and these are points that the pastor drew out, right? It says, God waited until the day of the deadline, which was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. He waited until the day of the deadline. He said, the last possible moment is when God often works his miracles. Think about that. The last possible moment is often when God works his miracles. And then he also said, if we rush it, we'll ruin it. Think about Saul here. If we rush it, we'll ruin it. Saul rushed it. He ruined it. Right? Samuel was on his way. He was coming. So here we see the last possible moment. I shared in another episode recently that I heard somebody say, and I don't know where this quote originated, but it's so good. It said, God doesn't move instantly, but he does move suddenly. And I remember years ago, I was sitting down talking to somebody who's been a believer, much longer than I have. And he used this phrase. And I remember this. This was literally from this could have been maybe around a decade ago now, give or take. Maybe a little bit less, but right around a decade. I remember he said, describing the Lord, he says, he's a last minute God. He's a last minute God. Does that mean that God is late? No, he's not late. God's timing is perfect, right? But if we rush it, we'll ruin it. He doesn't move instantly, but he does move suddenly. The last possible moment is when God often works his miracles. And so we see here in Esther that it's just like on the very day. We see with Samuel, it's like as soon as Saul had finished offering this, the Lord came. Or I'm sorry, Samuel came. So that time in between, like I said, that time in between is the time of trust. Will we trust God? Will we have faith in him? Or will we give in to fear, come to wrong conclusions about the character of God, and then take matters into our own hands? Which, hey, that's our intuitive response. That is our fallen, fleshly response. But listen. We have the Holy Spirit living inside of us. The Bible says that we've been given all things that we need to live a godly life in Christ Jesus, right? So we don't have to respond the way that people necessarily intuitively would. We don't have to respond the way that Saul did. We can choose to trust the Lord. Psalm 56:3. Let me flip over there now. I hadn't written that down, but hey, it's relevant and it's a great verse. Psalm 56:3. It says, "When I'm afraid, I put my trust in you." Then I'll go ahead and include verse 4 as well. "In God, whose word I praise, in God I trust, I shall not be afraid. What can flesh do to me?" That's Psalm 56:3-4. Now, for the specific application of all this general principle to my life, the way that I feel like the Lord, and this was through, like whenever I was reading the notes at Esther, later on, for the sake of this podcast, I included the account of Saul and Samuel, just kind of as a starting point. But it was through looking at these notes in Esther from that sermon that I feel like in a moment, this is what the Lord showed me. Now, when it comes to me, I feel like I'm always asking God for wisdom. I'm always asking. You guys have probably seen it in this podcast. I've talked about it so much. I've quoted James 1:5 so much, and I'm about to do it again in just a moment. But, I'm always talking about, I'm always thinking about wisdom, being like, okay, Lord, there's this circumstance. What should I do here? Like, if you were to look at my journal, aside from thinking that I'm crazy, you would probably also just notice how often I'm writing, Lord, what should I do about this? What should I do about this? And this, that, or the other, just seeking guidance, seeking wisdom, not wanting to misstep, not wanting to make a mistake, wanting to do things his way, wanting to hear his voice, wanting to obey his will. And you know what I know is true? So do you. That's what you want. You're listening to a podcast about the Bible. You want to follow the Lord. You want to hear his voice. You want to obey him. Well, you want to do what's right, obey his will, live out his will, follow his guidance, right? You want to use the verbiage of Romans 12:2, you want to be able to test and approve what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect, right? I know you do. You do. And it's a wonderful thing that you want to. But here's the thing for me. This is what I noticed. And this is where all this kind of tied together. Again, the last possible moment is when God often works his miracles. I would be asking God for wisdom for things that I didn't actually need wisdom for at that moment. They would be things down the line. They would be decisions that I needed later on, or that I was going to make later on. They would be things that would be days, weeks, maybe even months away. Stuff that I could see on the horizon. But that I, knew that there were going to be decisions that had to be made or things like that. And while I think it's always a good idea to ask for wisdom, what I came to realize is God will give me the wisdom when I need it. When I need it. I don't need to worry about, having it a week in advance. He will give me the wisdom I need when I need it. It is my responsibility to ask for it. James 1:5-8 says, "If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith with no doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways." But look at this passage. If we ask for wisdom and faith, we're promised it. "If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him." Look at that. If any lacks wisdom, God gives it generously to all, and it will be given. Look at how inclusive those terms are. But we need to ask, and we need to ask in faith. And so part of what it looks like to ask in faith is to say, God, there's this situation. I'm going to ask you for wisdom, and I believe you're going to give it to me when I need it. Because here's the thing. If I'm asking God for wisdom for things that are still, that aren't even decisions I can make today, it's fine. Ask him for the wisdom, but trust that he'll give you the response when you need it. Right? You can still be like weeks away. If I'm asking him for stuff like, okay, Lord, this is going to happen 3 weeks from now, and please show me exactly what I need to do in this circumstance now, there's an aspect of that is actually just trying to get control. There's an aspect of that that's not actually trusting God. It sounds like it's trusting God because you're asking him for wisdom, but what you're actually trying to do is not have to trust God because you're like, I need all the answers and I need the map laid out before me right now so that I can know exactly how this is going to go, exactly what I need to do now so that over the next 3 weeks or however long it is, I don't have to actually trust the Lord, wait on him. It's like, I got it. Control. And so it's a kind of spiritual looking facade for something that's actually just control. Do you see that? And so what is the truth? The truth is we'll have the wisdom when we need it. And it's going to, a lot of times it's going to be the day of. Kind of like we see in this passage here. That's been my response. And guys, this has changed things. Like I've seen prayers, like when I started operating on a day-by-day basis here, it's changed things so much. Now, this is directly tied into the episode I did a few episodes back, the lie of anxiety and the grace for today. And the kind of staple anchor or whatever verse for that was Matthew 6:34, where Jesus says, "Therefore do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble." The answer to anxiety is not control, but that's what we try to do. We try to control things to make anxiety go away. No, the answer to anxiety, like we just saw in Psalm 56, verses 3 and 4, is trusting God. When I'm afraid to put my trust in you. And like I said, we're oftentimes looking for control more than for wisdom and direction. Because trust says, Lord, this circumstance is coming. You know of it. I ask you for wisdom and I believe you'll give it to me. And now I'm going to live in today. I'm going to live in this moment. I'm going to be present right now and not let fears of tomorrow distract me from the things that are directly in front of me. So, I'll give you an example. This podcast, the one I'm recording right now, I've been stressed this week leading up to it. I've, had plenty of things to work on this week, and I was just thinking, okay, how exactly am I going to format this? How exactly am I going to word this? Is it going to be good? Is it not? Just kind of all these sort of thoughts, getting stressed out about it earlier this week in advance about it. And it really stole a lot of my joy in the moment because I was being anxious. I was being anxious about tomorrow. And yet here we are. And I'm recording it. And this morning, I believe that, at the end of spending my time with the Lord, I feel like he gave me a lot of clarity of the direction that this conversation needed to go. I had a general idea, but I feel like he really solidified and crystallized it. And then, right before I got set up to record this, I was talking to Lacey, and through that conversation, he encouraged me and confirmed that he was with me in this through her words. And that was the last moment. This is day of, right? And I'm not talking about not preparing or anything like that. Of course, the Bible talks plenty about preparing and talking about looking at the ant and in Proverbs chapter 6 and so on and so forth. I'm talking about being anxious for tomorrow. And I would highly encourage you to listen to the episode, and I'll link to it in the show notes of this one, the lie of anxiety and the grace for today in conjunction with this one, because I lay down some groundwork in that I also would love for you to be conscious of in this episode so that I'm not necessarily misunderstood and I'm not advocating something not good like laziness or poor planning. That's not what I'm talking about at all. What I'm talking about is trust. I'm talking about trusting the Lord. I'm talking about not being anxious about things that are not actually in front of us yet. So here's the thing that I know about you. You want God's direction. You want wisdom from the Lord. You want him to show you what to do. You have questions, and there's things that you're not sure what you need to do yet. So here are my questions. Have you asked God for wisdom? And when do you actually need to make the decision? Those are some relevant questions. And if you say, well, yeah, I've asked him for wisdom, and I'm actually not going to make the decision for another week, then don't let the stress of the decision take you out of the present. I mean, you may need to seek godly counsel. That's all over the scriptures. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. Proverbs 12:15. Seek counsel, pray, ask the Lord for wisdom. Do all the stuff that the Bible says when it comes to seeking the direction of the Lord, but realize that, listen, if you don't need to know the answer yet, then you don't need to know the answer yet, and being anxious about it will just steal. It'll steal. And this becomes an adventure because you'll see God move in just really cool ways where you're like, I did not see that coming. Because here's the thing. When we become anxious about decisions in the future, what we're intrinsically thinking is that nothing is going to change and there's going to be no intervening variables that are going to affect or clarify the decision, but that's not true. Stuff will happen. The Lord will bring in variables that'll make things really clear. And a lot of the decisions we think we'll have to make, we don't even have to make. They're just kind of pointless concerns. Proverbs 27:1. Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring. Guys, that's true. We don't know what a day may bring. Listen, yesterday was a day full of unexpected surprises for me. Some things I kind of knew were coming, although I didn't exactly know how they would go, and they went well. And then there were just some things that happened that were just complete surprises, totally unexpected. No way I could have known about them in advance. That were just incredible things. And then something else happened that kind of highlighted some like fears and insecurities in my own heart that was like, well, I need to, pray through that, because why did I panic in that circumstance? Why did I freak out like internally and kind of spiral into anxiety for a little bit whenever this thing happened over here? All this happened yesterday. Listen, guys, yesterday was a very eventful day. But the point is this, I didn't know what a day could bring. And there were things that happened that I just couldn't foresee, right? So, but here's the thing. John 5:17 says, but Jesus answered them, my Father is working until now, and I am working. The Lord is working in your life, even if you can't see it. He's doing things. And so, guys, I'm just really encouraging you not to be discouraged and to be in the present, because listen, the enemy will try to steal our joy with all sorts of hypothetical fears, hypothetical concerns. But when you look at the fruit of the Spirit, you see things like what? Love, joy, and peace, and patience, right? These are things we need. These things come from walking by the Spirit. These things come from trusting God. So what are the decisions you're needing to make right now? What's the stuff that's kind of on your radar? What's the stuff that you're concerned about? Listen, you have no idea what could happen between now and then. Just trust the Lord. Let's learn from the example of Saul. Let's learn from the example of Abraham and Sarah with Hagar and Ishmael and Isaac and that whole situation. Let's learn from the principle that we see there in Esther. Let's learn from those and a host of other examples that we can see from the scriptures. He'll give you wisdom. He said he would. Listen, I can see it. I can see it in my own life. Like, it's been so exciting to not have these really nebulous kind of general prayer requests, but have very specific things that are relevant to that day, and then seeing God that day answer that. That doesn't mean the specific situation is fully resolved, but the aspect of it that was relevant for that day was. In fact, there's even a phrase that I've said that, taken out of context, could be misunderstood, but I think I'll still say it here. It's the phrase, that's tomorrow's problem. And you might be like, well, Christian, that's called procrastination. It's like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. And I hope you know my heart by now enough to say, well, that's obviously not what he's talking about. What I'm talking about is what Jesus says here, where he says not to be anxious about tomorrow. That sufficient for the day is its own trouble. Remember from the other episode, give us this day our daily bread. Our entire Christian life is a series of todays that flow into eternity. And when we start living in the past or in the future, as opposed to walking with the Lord in the present, things begin to get off kilter, and the warning signs will be our emotions a lot of times. And that'll reflect the thoughts that we're thinking. Anxiety, worry, stress, panic, things like that. We don't know what a day may bring, guys. So let me just leave you with one verse from Psalm 27:14, just to hopefully strengthen your hand and encourage you. It says, wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. Because, guys, when you do wait for the Lord, when you do pass this test, you are strengthening your relationship with the Lord, because you're like, I waited on him. I approached this relationally. I didn't try to control things. I let him lead me, and I trusted him. I trusted him to come through. And his way is always better than our way. Is always better. And he just surprises and delights us in ways that we could never foresee. Like I said, there were at least 2 things that happened yesterday that were total surprises, and other things that were unexpected but very good. So let me just close us in prayer really quickly. Father, thank you for all these dear souls. Lord, I do ask for your help with this, for myself first and foremost, and then for everybody listening. Lord, I'm sorry, and I repent for all the times that I have sought control and tried not to trust you, but done it under the guise of seeking wisdom. Lord, where I have looked 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps down the line, as opposed to just the singular step in front of me and what I need to do there. So Lord, help us to walk with you on a daily basis, to be in today with you and the people around us, and to obey your words in Matthew 6:34. Lord, please bless everyone who's hearing this right now with us in a special, meaningful way today, that they know us from you. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, just a couple of closing remarks really quickly. As I've shared on this podcast a few times before, in addition to this podcast, I am also on staff with another ministry called Mentoring Men for the Master. And a few of you guys have reached out concerning biblical discipleship through to Mentoring Men for the Master. And I was talking to my boss about this, and we thought, well, maybe the Lord is doing something here. And so while I've mentioned it kind of in passing a few times before on this podcast, I think I'm going to begin including something at the closer of the episodes, although it's not going to be as long as this kind of introductory one. Basically, if you were interested in somebody coming alongside you and discipling you and helping you grow in your walk with Jesus and meeting with you, whether it's just kind of one time, phone call or video call or whatever, and or just kind of making it a regular thing, we have a variety of ways that that can be done. And if you want more information about that, I'd be happy to provide it. And just quickly, don't let the name Mentoring Men for the Master fool you. It is, we disciple both men and women. And so regardless of who you are, if you are interested in being discipled, feel free to reach out. So I'm going to, in the footer of this episode, include just some information on how that you can do that, and how you can request more information, an email address that you can reach out to, and also probably maybe I'll put a link to Mentoring Men's website as well. So, in closing, I just want to talk about the Bible is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, which means that any and all gifts given are indeed tax deductible. So if you feel so led to give, instructions on how to do so can be found in the footer of every podcast episode description. And thank you so much to those of you who have already given. May the Lord bless you abundantly for your generosity. All right, guys, until next time, God bless you.